I'm happy to introduce Colleen Batcheler, who will moderate our next panel on partnerships between General Counsel and outside counsel. Ms. Batcheler currently serves as Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary for ConAgra Foods. In this role, she oversees all legal activity for the company. Previously, Ms. Batcheler was Vice President and Corporate Secretary at Albertsons Incorporated. She also was Associate Counsel with the Cleveland Clinic Foundation and an Associate with the law firm of Jones Day. She earned a BA magna cum laude from State University of New York, College of Fredonia, and her JD at Case Western Reserve University, where she graduated Order of the Coif and served as Executive Notes Editor for Law Review. We're happy to welcome Ms. Batcheler back to the law school.
Thank you, Cassandra. Well, I just wanted to start. I know we're the last panel of the day, and then there was this whole big promise of wine at the end of this. So we have a lot of pressure to be exciting, and we were talking beforehand that it really should have been ask a question, get some of that wine, and not this brownie situation. But we'll just make a note of that for next year's program, I guess. And I just wanted to also start by thanking all of the panelists who have come before us today. You know, I personally believe that vulnerability is a real leadership quality, and so many of the women and men really showed vulnerability today in their storytelling, and I've certainly learned some things. And you know, when Peggy was up here and she began and said, well, someone told me I should just tell my story, and I thought that's not that interesting, I would just say I would encourage all of you, when you go back and you're mentoring other women or men, that you remember that your story is actually really interesting, and that storytelling is just such a wonderful way to share your experience and connect with others. And I think our stories are a lot more interesting than we sometimes give ourselves credit for. So we will now turn the panel to our panel and get some wonderful storytelling from these 5 terrific ladies. And we've got a great panel because we have a mix of outside attorneys, partners in law firms, and 3 general counsel on the panel. And so I think we're going to get a good mix of voices here. And we're also going to take a little bit of a little liberty with the title of our panel and probably go a little wider than just partnerships between inside counsel and outside counsel, and talk more about achieving strategic objectives, setting strategic objectives, and how we've experienced working toward accomplishing strategic objectives. So what we talked about starting with, and what I've asked each of the panelists to bring, is an initial story for each of you on an experience that they've had in really being involved in setting a strategic objective for their organization or a client. And then we'll move into a Q&A portion of the panel where we'll talk about a few elements of really achieving strategic objectives, you know, execution, empowering teams, building relationships, entrepreneurial risk-taking. And so I think we'll probably touch on a lot of the themes that we've heard already today, but hopefully also bring some new and new personal stories. So maybe we could just start right
All right.
to my right with Carolyn. And
That's fine. Thanks, Colleen.
Carolyn, please.
I'm Carolyn Bowler. I'm a partner at Squire Sanders. For those of you who aren't familiar with Squire Sanders, we're a global firm. We have 38 offices in 18 countries, and we most recently opened an office in Seoul, South Korea, that we're very excited about. When Colleen asked to tell a story about driving strategic change, well, my roles at Squire Sanders is I'm on the operating committee, I'm in charge of our industry groups, and I am head of the Women's Initiative, so that's the management perspective I bring to this. When Colleen asked us to tell a story about driving strategic change, I thought of some amusing vignettes, but I couldn't stop thinking about what was right in front of me every day, which is the fundamental change that's being undergoing in law firms as we speak. And as most of you know in this room, ever since the beginning of the Great Recession in 2008, there have been great challenges to law firms, and they're really undergoing a structural change. And what's been interesting to me is how different firms have reacted to them. I think what we concluded and I learned at Squire Sanders is when you're undergoing fundamental change in your industry, first and foremost, be honest about what's going on outside and what are the economic pressures. And what I found is a lot of law firms have not been very swift to actually adapt. And maybe they have a lot of old habits that are nice but aren't the new reality. And that would, unfortunately, for this room include paying very high associate starting salaries. And it might include, you know, buying partners for 8 figures and getting 3 years book of business. I mean, those are old habits and they can cost you dearly today. Anyone reading the papers knows Dewey LaBeouf suffered greatly from that second one. So the ABA Journal actually was recently reflecting on this, and they cited Billy Crystal. Now, I think maybe the people on this panel remember Billy Crystal. I'm not sure a lot of you out there do. But Billy Crystal was on Saturday Night Live, and he played a character called Fernando. And Fernando had a tagline that was, it is less important how you feel than how you look, and you look marvelous. And it's still a funny line, isn't it? But it really has a seed of truth, I think, about driving strategic change. And that is that in leadership of any organization, it's so easy to cling to the idea that, cling to the old ways, support the old ways, and to pretend that the storm around you isn't affecting you. Well, chances are the storm around is affecting you. And if you just keep on clinging, you're really going to get in trouble. And that's, I think, sort of the heart of what Billy Crystal is saying. It's really not about how you look. It's what you're really doing to respond to things. So I guess, you know, just in 3 more sentences, what did I learn from all this, managing through this? And we're still managing through it. You know, nothing too surprising, but I'll tell you what I learned, that driving strategic change through large institutions is very hard work. No surprise, but I suspect every woman on this panel is going to agree with that. I also learned that when you're doing it and really doing your job, you're in for more than your fair share of criticism. So you have to have a very thick skin. And lastly, I've learned, no surprise, you do make mistakes. But you also develop, I think, a collegiality and a friendship when you're going through this, when you're working closely with your partners, which is priceless and which really makes being part of a dynamic leadership team worth the effort. Suzanne?
Thanks, Carolyn. I'm Suzanne Day, and I am very proud to be the General Counsel and Chief Ethics Officer of the Lubrizol Corporation. I've been with Lubrizol for 15 years, and during that time period have seen a lot of change, both in my career development and in the company. So I was trying to really reflect on what it is that I could give to you to help you to understand how to drive change, or what I really think of, you know, all I've ever done is be a lawyer or lead lawyers. I don't have a ton of experience outside of that, but I think that being the leader of the legal division at a company and at Lubrizol does give me some insight into how to drive a strategic change. And one thing that I've learned that I think actually being a woman helps is, in order to get a team of people to get to an objective, you have to make sure that they understand the objective and what they need to do to get to the objective. And I think that being a woman helps with that, because I have found that when I am trying to get my team to do something, if I go and talk to somebody individually, and this maybe is more men, they're much more willing to admit to me, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, or I don't know how I fit in that change that has been articulated. You know, companies have a way of coming up with kind of broad, not so easy to implement goals. We want to be a $10 billion company. Okay, great, let's do that. Yeah, let's do it. But okay, so how do we do that? And I think to drive change, women are very well suited to sitting down with individuals and talking about, all right, do you understand that? Let's talk about it, and fleshing it out. And then going back into the room and saying, okay, we're on the team, we can do it, and now we have some ideas. But people, at least in my experience, are much more willing to admit to me, I'm not sure that I know what to do, and working out together. So I think that that's something that women can really add to leading a team towards the final objective, is having an offline conversation, getting people to talk and admit that maybe they're not so sure about what to do, and figuring it out.
Hi, I'm Judith Steiner. I'm the General Counsel, Chief Risk Officer, and Secretary at First Merit Corporation, which is a bank holding company in Akron, Ohio. We're a $14 billion holding company with over 200 branches in Ohio, Illinois, and Pennsylvania. And we're soon to be, if our transaction goes through, a $24 billion company with offices also in Michigan and Wisconsin. We announced an acquisition about a month ago, and we'll have over 400 branches. So it's, when I started at First Merit many years ago, we were $2 billion, and now we're going to be 12 times the size, and it's been really fun. I thought, I could do this job for a year, and here I am 22 years later. In terms of, I was thinking there were a few examples I could talk about, I guess, in terms of driving strategic change. The one that really kept resounding or coming to mind, it was a specific example. Several years back, before I was the GC, I was managing legal and compliance at the time. And we had some anti-money laundering issues. It's all public, so I can talk about it. And we were given a cease and desist order by our primary regulator, the OCC, and that's a very, very bad thing in the banking industry. And as you may have heard, there's just a lot of pressure on banks in terms of anti-money laundering compliance, especially post 9/11. So I was managing compliance and legal at the time, and they interviewed for a new BSA officer, and they also interviewed me, asked me to be considered, and finally they came down to, Judy, do you want to do it? They didn't find a suitable outside candidate. I think I was a lot cheaper too, so I said, sure, I just hope people will listen to me, because all the others, I think, were men. But that wasn't really why I said that. It was just that it was a big job, and I really embraced it. It's one of those things where you say with your mouth, sure, I can do it, and your head is saying, there's no way I can do this. But you have to, earlier, thinking about a couple of the themes that we've heard today, I think you have to look confident, be confident. I started, and I knew a little bit about anti-money laundering, but it wasn't one of my specific areas. I started reading everything I could. I went and I got my CAMS license, which is a certified anti-money laundering specialist. And I think you just have to seize upon opportunities even though you don't think that you can do them, and that was another theme that we've heard today. And in terms of meeting the strategic goal of getting out of that cease and desist order, because once you're in that, you can't do acquisitions, it's just bad, it's expensive. I pulled the team together and leveraged our project management, leveraged some great people, offered them new positions, men and women, and really tried to build collaboratively and worked through the emotion. Things got very difficult and heated and a lot of pressure on us, and that's the other thing that you have to try to work through that and not get too emotional and take deep breaths and not take things personally. It's another thing I've learned along the way is don't take people so personally. Usually if they're reacting to you, that's because that's the way they are. So I think, I guess those are some of the lessons learned. Utilize the people around you and, give them opportunities. And we were very successful. We got out of that order, I think, in record time. It was very expensive. We also used the outside resources effectively. And I think a lot of lessons learned. And it's fun because I never really thought about that. But as I read some of the questions today, it really makes you think and reflect on those life lessons.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I am the General Counsel, actually the Chief Legal Officer now, they changed my title, at University Hospitals Health System. I also do all of their governance work, so I'm their secretary.